Hi everyone, my name is Jane Leverich, and today I will be presenting on the concept of food or nutrient order during a meal and the impact that it has on postprandial glucose and insulin levels, specifically in people with prediabetes. This is our agenda for the day. I will start by providing background information on the concept of food order, as well as postprandial glucose and insulin levels in the body of someone who's healthy versus in the body of someone with prediabetes. Next, I will go over key aspects of the specific study that I am presenting on. After that, we will take a look at the results that were determined following the study. And finally, I will move on to summarizing some key points and leading you into discussion questions. Have you heard of food order before? So before I read this article, I had kind of heard of it on social media because people are using it as this new sort of diet trend to control their blood glucose levels in an attempt to lose weight. So that's where I've heard of it previously. But today we're going to be talking about food order in people with prediabetes and how it might actually be a positive nutrition intervention. So food order is a concept in which macronutrients contained in a meal are consumed in a specific order in an attempt to slow the absorption of glucose. So let's take a quick high-level look at what's happening in terms of blood glucose and insulin after we consume a meal. So first we'll look at blood glucose and insulin levels in someone who's healthy. So a healthy person would consume a meal and in turn their blood glucose levels would rise. And after that, this really friendly looking pancreas would secrete insulin, which is a hormone that signals to our cells that blood glucose levels are high and essentially tells our cells to take up the glucose in the blood. And in turn, that glucose can be used for energy. Now let's look at how this same process would look for someone who has prediabetes. So this person with prediabetes would eat a meal which would cause blood glucose levels to rise. And instead of the pancreas just being able to secrete this normal amount of insulin, signaling to the cells to start taking up that glucose, a person with prediabetes has cells that don't respond normally to insulin. So this means that the pancreas will continue to secrete more and more insulin in an attempt to get the cells to respond. Eventually, the pancreas cannot keep up with this overproduction of insulin, and the person's blood glucose levels will rise, and they will not be taking that glucose up for energy, so the glucose will remain in the blood. And chronic increased blood glucose levels are an indicator of prediabetes that can eventually lead to type 2 diabetes. So in the study that I chose, the title is The Impact of Food Order on Postprandial Glycemic Excursions in Prediabetes. Researchers were interested in determining if food order, a simple behavioral strategy, had any effect at reducing glycemic responses in prediabetes patients. So in this study, 15 male and female participants between 30 and 65 years of age with a BMI between 25 to 40 with prediabetes were included. Patients taking corticosteroids or anti-diabetic medication were excluded because the researchers wanted the sole focus to be on the nutrition intervention. Researchers designed an isocaloric meal with exactly the same composition, which all participants consumed on 3 separate days, 1 week apart after a 12-hour overnight fast. So this is what the composition of the meal looked like. It included carbohydrate, protein, and fat. Each meal was consumed in 30 minutes under these experimental conditions. So either carbohydrate first, protein and vegetables first, or vegetables first. Each participant experienced all 3 food orders on 3 different days, 1 week apart. So let's take a look at these experimental conditions a little bit closer. As mentioned earlier, each meal was consumed in 30 minutes under varying experimental conditions. So there was carbohydrate first, protein and vegetables first, or vegetables first. Under the first condition, participants ate carbohydrates in the first 10 minutes, which consisted of ciabatta bread. In the next 10 minutes, there was a rest period, and for the final 10 minutes of the first condition, participants consumed protein, which was chicken, and vegetables, which included lettuce, tomatoes, bell peppers, red cabbage with balsamic vinegar, and olive oil. Under the second condition, participants consumed protein and vegetables first, And under the last condition, participants consumed vegetables first. Blood samples were drawn just before a meal ingestion, as well as at 30, 60, 90, 120, 150, and 180 minutes after the start of the meal. Glucose concentrations and plasma concentrations of insulin were assessed at each of these points in time. Let's talk about what researchers found. One similarity found was that baseline fasting glucose concentrations were similar among the participants in all three meal conditions. This would make sense as each participant's baseline was taken after 12 hours of fasting. So, as can be observed in these two graphs, the carbohydrate first condition demonstrates much greater glycemic variability than does protein and vegetable first or vegetable first. Additionally, both protein and vegetable first showed reduced postprandial glucose levels at 30 and 60 minutes compared with carbohydrate first, which showed a large spike in glucose and insulin levels between 30 and 60 minutes. Additionally, compared with the carbohydrate first meal order, the other two meal orders showed similar postprandial glucose peaks, with vegetables first food order requiring the least insulin to dispose of the same amount of carbohydrate. So, kind of in summary of the results, the carbohydrate first meal pattern demonstrates glycemic variability, whereas glucose levels were pretty stable in the other meal conditions. In summary, these results clearly demonstrate that manipulation of nutrient order during a meal significantly impacts postprandial glucose and insulin levels in individuals with prediabetes. Additionally, commonly prescribed nutritional strategies to control or eradicate prediabetes include carbohydrate restriction and avoidance of high glycemic index foods. While these measures are effective, adherence to a low carbohydrate diet can be challenging for patients. So food order provides this innovative alternative strategy that could mitigate the metabolic effects of carbohydrate, which is potentially great news for people with prediabetes and might be a little bit easier to adhere to than a low carb diet. Let's discuss. What do you think? Do you think food order could be a successful intervention in those with prediabetes? Let me know. Additionally, I have a few questions related to the article that I would love to discuss. So one, what are your thoughts on the composition of the meal that was provided to participants? Would you have added or removed any of the foods that were included? Why? Two, are there other populations that you think the concept of food order could be beneficial to? If so, who and why? And as it relates to the study's results, vegetables first and protein and vegetables first meal orders showed similar postprandial glucose peaks. Why do you think that the vegetables first food order required the least insulin to dispose of the same amount of carbohydrates? Thank you all so much for your time. I am looking forward to discussing this topic further with you all.